My name is Anna. I'm 35 years old, and I was supposed to get married last Saturday. The dress was white, the flowers were ivory, the music was soft and elegant, everything I had meticulously planned for over a year. Every single detail was meant to represent grace, poise, balance. Everything, except the truth. Let me be honest with you right from the start, I didn't grow up believing in fairy tales. I believed in control, in planning, in building something so beautifully solid that no one could shake it. And yet, here I am, telling you how my entire world cracked open because of one single sentence whispered during my wedding. So before we go any further, let me ask, have you ever had a moment where you felt your stomach drop before your brain even caught up? That was me, standing there in my dress, veil perfectly pinned, lipstick just reapplied. I was ready to walk down that aisle. Ready to become someone's wife. And then I heard her. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even directed at me. But it was clear. It came from the front row, left side of the aisle, just behind my father, just before the music swelled. My sister. Clara. She leaned over to someone, I still don't know who, and whispered, he was never meant to marry her. No hesitation. No remorse. Just that, he was never meant to marry her. Now. I've replayed that moment in my head more times than I care to admit. The way her voice wrapped around those words like silk dipped in poison. The casual cruelty in her tone. And the thing is, I felt it before I understood it. My spine stiffened. My heartbeat skipped. But outwardly, I smiled. Because I was raised never to flinch. Never to show the crack. I took another step forward. Another. The music played. My father held my arm like nothing was wrong. But I wasn't thinking about the vows anymore. I wasn't thinking about our honeymoon, or the reception, or the dance. I was thinking about Clara. My sister. My blood. I was thinking about all the strange moments I had brushed off, her sudden closeness to him, the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes, the private glances I thought I imagined. I was thinking about the night I caught her leaving his apartment because she was dropping off something he forgot. The way she deflected with humor. The way I trusted her. And in that moment, as I reached the altar, something inside me shifted. I didn't panic. I didn't freeze. I watched his face, the man I was about to marry, and I looked for guilt. There was none. Not yet. He smiled at me, completely unaware that I knew. So I smiled back. Because I decided, right then, that I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to burn. And yes, I'll tell you everything. Because if you're here, still listening, you're already in this with me. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about silence, and the moment you choose not to accept it anymore. So if you're watching, go ahead. Like. Subscribe. Follow. Because this isn't some random viral wedding meltdown. This is about the moment I decided to stop pretending. Now, let's rewind just a little. Clara was always the beautiful one. The effortlessly seductive one. The kind of woman who walked into a room and people turned, not because of who she was, but because of how she moved. Blonde hair like a shampoo commercial, ocean blue eyes, always the tightest dress in any room. And yet, we were close. Or so I thought. People said we were different. I was the classic one, the calm one, the woman who built her reputation on elegance and restraint. She was fire. I was marble. Turns out, she was smoke. And I was standing on a fault line. As the priest began the opening blessing, I stood there beside the man I thought loved me. My hands were steady. My voice calm. But inside, I was already planning how to destroy the illusion. Do you want to know the worst part? It wasn't just what she said. It was the way she said it. Like she owned it. Like she knew something I didn't. And maybe she did. But not for long. So I whispered back to the altar boy behind me, barely audible, "Do me a favor, give me 2 minutes before the vows." He nodded, confused. I smiled. The priest asked if we were ready to proceed. I took a step forward. Raised one hand. Looked out at that chapel full of people who came expecting love and unity and candlelight. And I said, "Before we begin, I think there's something everyone needs to hear." The room froze. And my sister's face? She went pale. That's where we end this chapter, and trust me, what comes next is not what you're expecting. If you think this is the climax, it's only the warm-up. Stick around for chapter 2. Because I'm just getting started. There's something strange about silence. Not the peaceful kind. I'm talking about the sharp, breathless silence that creeps in just before a car crash, or in this case, just before a wedding detonates in front of 100 people. That's the kind of silence I stood in, at the front of the church, bouquet in hand, veil catching the light, and the entire room holding its breath. And I loved it. I know that sounds cruel, but hear me out. For once, I wasn't the one pretending. For once, they were the ones frozen, unsure of where this was going, afraid to shift in their seats in case they missed the next line. The guests. My family. Him. Clara. Especially Clara. She sat in the front row, second seat from the aisle. Her legs crossed, that flawless hair of hers pulled behind one ear. The same way she used to when we were kids, right before she'd lie through her teeth and get me grounded. Only now, her lipstick wasn't smiling. Her eyes were locked on mine. She knew. And that was the power. That moment, right there. Because she didn't know how much I knew. That's what terrified her. So I held the silence just a little longer. I turned to the priest, sweet old man, probably regretting saying yes to this wedding, and I smiled. "Father," I said, voice steady, "I promise we'll continue in just a moment. But I think the truth deserves to be in the room first." The murmurs started. The energy changed. A few heads turned. One of my cousins, I think, pulled out his phone, not to record, but probably to text someone, "Something's happening. Stay tuned." I stepped back, careful, slow, as if giving the floor to the ghosts now gathering in the chapel. I looked at my groom. Let's call him Daniel, for the sake of not making this story too public. Daniel, sweet, naive, charming Daniel, with his dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, and that crooked half-smile he thought melted hearts. He looked confused. Not guilty. Not yet. But definitely worried. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Anna, what's going on?" I didn't answer him. I turned my attention to Clara. She sat, perfectly still. Back straight. No blinking. Like a snake before it strikes, or maybe a deer in headlights. I don't know which. Maybe both. "Clara," I said, and her name landed like a slap against the stone floor, "since you decided to whisper something so insightful just before I walked down the aisle, I think it's only fair we give you a microphone." You could hear the collective gasp ripple through the room. It wasn't loud. But it moved. Her lips parted. "Anna, I didn't." "Oh, but you did," I interrupted, still smiling. You said, and I quote, he was never meant to marry her. Now, I'm assuming you weren't referring to Aunt Marjorie's third husband, so I just thought, why not clear the air before the vows? More whispers. Someone coughed. The priest took a nervous step back. And Daniel? He reached for my hand. Anna, let's talk about this later, okay? Not here. Not now. Why not now? I turned to him, still smiling. We're surrounded by family. And honesty's the foundation of a strong marriage, right? He said nothing. That's when I pulled the phone out of my bouquet. Yes, hidden inside the bouquet, under the ribbon, was a small recorder. No, I'm not paranoid. I'm just prepared. Always have been. I pressed play. And there it was. Clara's voice. From 2 nights earlier. Crisp. Clear. He tells me he loves her, but I see how he looks at me. He was never meant to marry her. He just feels guilty. I'm the one he wants. He just doesn't know how to leave. You could have dropped a pin. Or a bomb. Same effect. Gasps. A few people actually stood up. I saw my aunt whisper, "Oh my God," and cover her mouth. My father froze in place. My mother looked like she might faint. And Clara? She didn't even deny it. She just looked at me. No tears. No apology. Just that same cold, calculating stare she's had since high school. I looked at Daniel. And that's when the guilt hit him like a train. He didn't even try to lie. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, like a man who just realized his entire life unraveled in less than 2 minutes. Anna, he whispered, I didn't want this to happen. But it did, I replied. And the worst part? You weren't even brave enough to admit it. I turned to the crowd. So, anyone else want to share a secret before I say I do? Laughter. Honest, shocked, awkward laughter. The kind people give when they're not sure if they should laugh or run. I looked back at Clara. She finally spoke. You don't have to do this. We can talk. Please. I tilted my head. Oh, I do have to do this. Because for once, I'm not playing nice. And then I took a step back and turned to the priest. Father, I'd like to skip the vows. I have something else in mind. He blinked, confused. Anna, are you calling off the wedding? I smiled wide. No. I'm rewriting it. There's a strange kind of electricity that fills a room when people realize they're not just guests anymore, they're witnesses. That was the exact moment my wedding stopped being a ceremony and became a spectacle. And I was no longer the bride. I was the host. The priest stepped back. He didn't say anything, but his expression said enough. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the Bible, like he'd just been caught in someone else's storm. Daniel stood beside me, paralyzed, his eyes darting between me and Clara like maybe, just maybe, this was a dream he could still wake up from. But it wasn't. This was real. This was mine. And I was done giving second chances. I won't be reading the vows I wrote, I said, turning to face everyone, not just Daniel. Not just Clara. Everyone. They were written for a man I thought existed. But that man, he never showed up. Silence. God, the silence was so delicious. I spent months writing them, I continued, rehearsing them in the mirror like a fool. Talking about patience, trust, forever. But here's what I learned this morning. Forever is a lie when trust was never there to begin with. Daniel stepped forward, his voice barely a breath. Anna, please, we can talk. Just us. This doesn't have to. I held up a hand. No. You had your chance. You had years to talk. You chose to lie instead. To me. To her. I turned to Clara, who still sat frozen, her face pale beneath her perfect makeup. And you're not even sorry, are you? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I smirked. Didn't think so. The guests were dead silent. A few looked uncomfortable. A few looked fascinated. Phones were out now, some recording, some texting. I didn't care. Let them capture it. Let them share it. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a broadcast. My new vows, I said, lifting my chin, are not for the man beside me. They're for the woman I've become because of him. A soft murmur moved through the crowd, but no one dared interrupt me. I vowed to never again ignore the red flags just because they're dressed in charm. I vowed to never hand over my future to someone who can't hold their own past. I vowed to never let anyone, even blood, make me feel small, or stupid, or replaceable. Now the crowd was shifting, people leaning in, hands over mouths, eyes wide. Not in pity. In awe. Daniel tried again. Anna. No, I cut in sharply. You don't get to talk. Not today. I turned back to the guests. You all came here for a love story. You wore your best clothes. You bought gifts. You smiled and clapped and believed this was going to be the beginning of something beautiful. I paused, inhaling deeply. And it is. Just not the way any of you expected. Clara stood up, suddenly, her face flushed, her breathing shallow. Anna, please. This is between us. We're sisters. Can we just... Sisters? I laughed, but there was no joy in it. You lost that title when you slept with my fiancé. When you stood in that front row and said those words like you owned him. Like I was just a placeholder. She looked like she might cry. But it was too late for that. The crocodile tears didn't move me. Not anymore. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, softer now. More controlled. I'm doing this because truth deserves a place in this room. Because I refuse to begin a life with someone who lied to me with his mouth, and loved someone else with his eyes. I stepped to the side of the altar, placing my bouquet gently on the floor. I thought today would be about promises, I said. And in a way, it still is. But the only promise I'm making is to myself. A pause. I let that sink in. And the only person I'm walking out of here with is me. It was at that exact moment the room changed again. There were no gasps this time. No murmurs. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after an earthquake. The kind that says, something irreversible just happened. I turned back to Daniel. I forgive you, I said, and he blinked like I'd slapped him. But that doesn't mean I want you back. Or that you deserve me. It just means I'm not carrying your mistakes into my future. Then to Clara. I hope he was worth it. I really do. Because you didn't just betray me. You chose him. And now you have him. Every broken, cowardly piece of him. I walked down the steps of the altar, slowly, deliberately. The train of my dress dragged behind me like a curtain falling on the last scene of a bad play. At the doors, I turned once more. I don't need applause, I said. I'm not a performer. I'm just a woman who refused to be humiliated in silence. And with that, I walked out. The sound of my heels on the chapel floor was all I could hear. No one clapped. No one called my name. And honestly, I didn't want them to. The silence behind me said everything. It was the sound of people realizing they'd come for a wedding and witnessed something else entirely. I didn't cry. That surprised me, actually. I always imagined that if something like this ever happened, I'd crumble. I'd run out sobbing, mascara streaked, dress torn, heart in pieces. But I didn't run. I walked. Not slowly, not dramatically, just steady. My own rhythm. My own pace. My own choice. The big wooden doors opened, and sunlight flooded the hallway. The air outside felt different, like it didn't belong to that church. Like it hadn't heard the lies, the whispers, the gasps. It smelled like lavender, and the sky was painfully blue. And I, still in my wedding dress, walked out into it without hesitation. No one followed. For a moment, I just stood there. Let the sun warm my skin. Let the world exist around me again. You ever have a moment like that? When the world feels too bright? When everything's still moving and breathing and buzzing, and you're just standing there, quiet, trying to remember what you're supposed to do next? That was me. In full bridal gear. Alone on the church steps. And you know what? I smiled. Because I realized something. Something really simple. I had nothing to prove anymore. Not to him. Not to her. Not even to myself. I took off my veil, gently, like it was the last lie I needed to shed, and dropped it right there on the stone steps. I looked back at the church for just 1 second. Not long. Just enough to let the image burn into memory, stained glass, open doors, the echo of 100 silent people too stunned to speak. Good. Let them sit with it. I started walking. The driver who was supposed to take me and Daniel to the reception was parked in the lot, jaw hanging open as he recognized me. Miss. Mrs., he fumbled. Just Anna, I said calmly. Call me Anna. I told him I didn't need a ride. I wanted to walk. And I did. I walked down that road in a wedding dress worth more than most used cars, bouquet long abandoned, with my head high and my heart finally beating for me. Cars passed. Some slowed. People looked. Some probably thought I'd been left at the altar. They were half right. But I wasn't broken. I was free. And it wasn't just poetic, it was real. I felt my spine straighten, my lungs expand. Like I'd been holding my breath for 2 years and only just now remembered how to exhale. And yeah, maybe it was dramatic. But let me ask you something, after spending your whole life trying to be polite, composed, silent, don't you deserve a little drama the moment you choose yourself? I didn't go home that night. I went to a hotel, booked the nicest room they had, still in my dress. The girl at the front desk blinked like I was a hallucination. I just smiled. Big day, I said. She didn't ask questions. She handed me the key. I spent the night drinking champagne alone, barefoot on a balcony, city lights glowing below me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd escaped. I didn't post about it. I didn't rage online. I didn't beg for sympathy. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making them pay. It was about not making myself pay anymore. You know, people say weddings are about two becoming one. But that's not always a good thing. Sometimes two becoming one just means you're erasing half of who you are. And I'm not erasing anything anymore. So if you're still here, if you've watched all the way through, thank you. Not for the attention. Not for the likes or the views. But for witnessing a woman choose her voice over her silence. And if you've ever felt small, invisible, betrayed in front of people who should have loved you, I want you to imagine this. A woman in a wedding dress, standing in the middle of a hotel balcony, arms open, hair undone, glass of champagne in one hand, and peace in the other. That's me now. I won't tell you what happened to Clara. Or to Daniel. Not because I don't know, oh, I know, but because it's not my ending to tell anymore. This ending? This story? It's mine. And if you take anything with you from it, let it be this. Elegance never protected me. Truth did. And I'll choose that every time. So, no need to like or subscribe. Unless, of course, you're ready to stop pretending to. Fade to white.